Storehouse Media Group. Sherry, how are you? I know you're excited about our guest.
I'm doing fine, thank you. And I am excited about our guest. It's Ed Hudson. And Ed Hudson, he's a man that of many talents. And I would love to talk to him about it. But welcome, Ed.
Well, hey, I let me tell you, I really appreciate this opportunity to be on your show. I really do.
Well, we,
Ex-
we appreciate you doing coming on the show. Yeah. Well, a little bit about Ed before we get started. 34 years in law enforcement, and he retired as a special agent supervisor from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. And I came to know Ed as the author, soon to be a #1 best-selling author of As the Crow Flies. And that was it was a true story. It reminded me of American Made, but it was one very close to your heart, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so tell us, what was As the Crow Flies about?
Well, it's about the life story of Freddie Crow. He was a international drug smuggler that grew up in a town not far from where I live, probably about 15 miles. Um, he I I'd never really even heard of him until I started working over there. My first job was with the Central Police Department, and it didn't take me long to hear about him then. But he he was quite the individual and a fantastic pilot. Just it was he could pull off feats that most pilots wouldn't even try.
Wow. How long did it take to write the book?
I don't know. I think probably a year or so. I I wrote a few chapters and got it going and all, and then I kind of hit a block, and just some things happened, and that set me back on the path again. I came to realize it was a story worth telling.
And is that what compelled you to write it? Is that you came to realize it? What actually pushed you? Because writing a book, people have to have that
Yeah, well, I had thought about writing a book for some time, and I just hadn't thought about writing this book. This one really surprised me, but um, getting to know Freddie after he turned his life around, and walking through the final days of his life with him, and getting to know his family, and I just became so close to them. They're like my own family now, and this podcast comes at kind of a sad time for us because Freddie's oldest sister, who he introduced to me as the sweetest woman he had ever known, and I came to realize that that was probably true. But his oldest sister passed away this past Thursday, and it's uh, it brings back a lot of memories.
Wow.
and yeah, and we wanted to dedicate this show to her because her service is Friday, and it was someone you were close to, and she played a big role in the book.
She did. She was a character that people asked about. They would read the book, and they said, "Well, we know what happened to Freddie, but how's Miss Bobby?" Her name's Bobby Gradit, and she was just uh, I don't know. The word saint comes to mind. She she tried her best to steer Freddie in the right direction, um, and kept on trying. She never gave up, and I think in the end, when we made the final arrest for him, and all, and he began to uh, make changes in his life, I was thinking to myself, maybe we done something here. Maybe we did some good. And then I got to go to know Miss Bobby and the influence that she had on his life. And I came to realize that's where it came from.
And have you seen that out of criminals that have reformed themselves? We don't hear those stories a lot.
Well, you don't. And I, um, I'm not sure what the answer to that is. There's been more than one success story to come out of this. When you read the book, you'll read about Freddie's partner. His name was Billy Deacle. Well, Freddie and Billy both got arrested in the end, and Freddie chose to cooperate with law enforcement, and he received a 10-year sentence when he was looking at a life sentence. And Billy chose not to, and he received 2 life sentences. And it was a desperate time for him. His wife, Miss Kay Deacle, she was a very strong Christian, and she continued to pray for him. And she told him, she said, God will see this through. Well, Billy had a hard time believing that when he was staying behind bars. But when President Obama did the mass release of nonviolent offenders, Billy happened to be one of them, and he got released and has completely turned his life around. I've met him, I've talked with him on numerous occasions, and we still talk. And I can tell you that man he doesn't need to be behind bars today. I can tell you that.
Wow. So there's 2 success stories of people reformed that changed their lives around.
Yes.
That's great. Out of one book. There you go. Right. Good.
Yeah. In your foreword, speaking of Billy Deacle, the foreword was written by George Deacle. And
yeah.
Yeah. And tell who George Deacle is, which is, it's very interesting considering Billy was his brother.
Well, let me tell you who Billy's family is. His grandfather was a judge. His great grandfather was a judge. His grandfather was a sheriff. His father was I think, colonel in the Florida Department of Corrections. His sister worked for the Florida Department of Corrections. And then he has a brother, George R. Deacle Sr., who was the last prosecutor for Ted Bundy. And also the author of many books himself. He is an extremely intelligent man. And everybody was somehow or another involved in law enforcement except for Billy, and he went his own way.
Yeah. But he circled back, right?
He did.
After the book.
He did.
After the book. Yeah.
What do you think made those guys become drug smugglers? Was it financially greed? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I can tell you that they enjoyed the money that they made, but it was the excitement. And that was one thing. Judge Roger Vinson was the sentencing judge in this case. And I still remember that at Freddie's sentencing, he talked about that he had sat through quite a few trials involving this organization, and he'd come to realize that he felt like it was probably more of a motivation for excitement than anything. And I believe that's true. That Freddie just loved excitement. I mean, we're talking about whenever they're coming, they would fly down to Belize in Central America and load up with a load of marijuana and come back, and just before they came back into land, they had to get down on the deck, which is flying just above the water. And they did this 200 miles out, and they were flying so low over the waves of the Gulf of Mexico that salt would collect on the windshield from the sea spray. And your typical pilot doesn't want to do that.
Yeah,
Now,
they were really nervous about it, weren't they? I mean, they sent somebody from Homeland Security to test out, talk about the radars.
and it was kind of interesting that as dangerous as that was, Freddie would get offended if he didn't get to fly what he thought was his number of flights.
Yeah. Wow.
Because he wanted to do it.
And I mean, did these guys have a background to get along with people from other countries, like Belize and other parts of Central America?
I think that came from a connection that Billy had. Um, uh, and that's how that came about. Billy knew somebody who knew somebody down in Belize, and that's how they did their business.
Well, this again, this was a book that was important to you and near and dear to your heart. And I remember when you first called me to talk to me about working on it with you, your voice cracked as you shared the story with me. And I'm like, wow. And then I kept thinking American Made, because it was so like American Made. It's a true story, but it's a story of redemption. And
Yes.
that's what, for me, threw it over the top, was the redemption part of that story. And what happened with Freddie. In writing that book and putting it out, what is the message you want readers to walk away from your book with?
I think the message is within the book, that just like Freddie, when after he got sick, and maybe we should back up and talk about that a little bit. He after we arrested him, and he and I continued to have contact after he went to prison, and when he got out, he came to see me, and became an actual documented informant for the Florida Department of Law Enforcement, and I handled him, uh, and then he comes down with cancer. Uh, he was doing fantastic. He had his own business. He had gotten married to Miss Sandra, and just everything was just going so great. And then all of a sudden, he's got inoperable liver cancer. So I think at that time I was getting real close to retirement too, so I went ahead and closed him out as a confidential source, and he lived, I don't know, probably 5 miles from me, and so I felt compelled to just sort of help walk with him in his last days, and it was like about 2 years, I think, that from the time that he was diagnosed till his passing, um, a little over 2 years actually. And he, during the time that I would talk with him, there was just a few times that he would question his salvation, because he just knew that he had done so many bad things wrong, and I think what I want people to know is that the blood of Christ is strong enough to wash anything away, and and that's what I tried to. That's what I convinced him of. He didn't talk about it anymore then. He was pretty set, and he knew where he was going. So it's just that when you walk with someone during those last days like that, you just draw real close to them, and I think that's where the emotion came at.
Yeah.
All right, let's go ahead. Yes,
No, I was just going to say, it was just, watching the lawman and the criminal come together and how you walked them to that, that point of where he transitions into eternity, and love and mercy of God. It's just overwhelming. It's hard for us to imagine.
absolutely. So Ed, what was it like working with Sherry with your book? Tell us about that.
Oh, great. I'll tell you how good it was. I've referred several people to her. Since we've done this book. It was fantastic. She was just so helpful in helping to grow the pages and all. It was fantastic.
That's fantastic. And just being able to really put it together, put that story alive, what you wanted, right?
Right, right. Um, it's not a large book, and um, I hear people that tell me they've read it and just didn't put it down until they finished it. And um, but I think it's that kind of story. We tried to put it to where each chapter built to excitement for the next chapter. So,
Well, congrats on your success. I look at all the reviews you have, and it being a best-selling book, and it definitely is an intriguing story, just from the whole drug smuggling and you capturing to the relationship that you built. That really, paints light to, how a relationship can happen even between adversaries. And that was really a great story.
yeah, I guess in a way you could say anybody can get along if you try. So,
You just got to be open to do it for sure.
right.
Where is best place people can purchase the book and learn more about you?
Well, it's still available on Amazon, or you can walk into probably about any bookstore and just tell them that you'd like to order the book. As the Crow Flies: The Redemption of an International Drug Smuggler, written by Ed Hudson, and they can order it for you. So,
All right. Well, awesome. Thanks again, Ed.
Thank you,
okay.
Ed.
Thank you.
All right. That was a special simulcast of the Neil Haley Show in the Storehouse.